Hello, everybody. I'm a practicing therapist and a doctoral student of psychology. Today, I wanted to talk about why avoidants struggle to say sorry, right? Or acknowledge that they probably made a mistake, and they usually are sorry, but the act of saying sorry can be where they kind of trip up or they don't want to, or that's when they start avoiding that particular conversation. And it's usually because they're guilty they hurt you, if I'm being completely honest. But we're going to go ahead and break down all of these aspects so that you can recognize what's really going on internally with avoidance that makes them avoid saying, I'm sorry, right? And the very first one is actually they're afraid of losing your respect. Like they're afraid that you'll respect them less and they feel like they may respect themselves less. It is not necessarily true, but the reason why is they fear that saying sorry will actually make them lose some sort of authority, status, or respect in that relationship. Even in like professional relationships, they do this all the time. They feel like their self-worth is very closely tied to being competent or being right. And admitting that they're sorry actually makes them feel like they're admitting they had a wrongdoing, and that also means that they're a failure, right? You see how that worked? And of course, that's pretty intense, but that's how they perceive it. And so a lot of avoidance, their wound is that they somewhere believe that they are never good enough, that they're never competent enough, that they always have to work really hard to climb that ladder, and that basically saying sorry is a submission saying I did fail, I'm a failure. And often when they actually do say sorry, it comes from the fact that they recognize usually that their self-worth is not just about being competent or right. So it shows a sign of healing if they're getting more comfortable saying sorry, okay? The next one is avoidants struggle with extreme emotions, and often they need time to figure out what they're feeling. So sometimes they're not really sure how to verbalize it. They might actually feel sorry, but they're not really sure what that is right away. They're not really sure what just happened. They might feel really bad they hurt you, and they're not sure what action to do next. And so you might see that why they struggle to say it is simply because they're just taking longer to process what truly happened. Unlike secure and anxious partners, they may not process emotions very quickly, which actually leads them to distancing themselves after conflict. Even if they were the one that they feel like they probably shouldn't have said what they did, sometimes they just need time to recognize what happened. Even if you're the one that did something, or vice versa, because most of the time it's both of y'all, right? They just need to process it, right? And you can even see that when you say sorry, they're not really sure what they're supposed to say. I'm not sure if you guys have ever noticed that, but some avoidant individuals, they truly have this interesting relationship with the word sorry. Sometimes when you say sorry, they might say, you don't need to say sorry. Let's just move on. I'm not sure if you've ever seen that, but sometimes they just don't know that sorry is something appropriate to be said at a certain time. They feel like if you say sorry, you're just doing it to like pity them. And that's actually the next one. Sometimes they feel like saying sorry is like an excuse. And they feel like if they say sorry, then it gives them a pass to not change. I know that sounds a little strange, and I'm going to try and break it up because I can imagine a lot of y'all might have questions about this. They feel like sorry is inauthentic. Sorry is like just a quick Band-Aid. And so some avoidants, and you guys probably have seen this, where they don't say sorry, but they do the action to make it better, right? And so let's say an avoidant had a very rough day. This is very common. They had a tough day at work, and they come home, and maybe you're feeling really anxious about something separate, and you're bringing that to them, and you're repeating it, and maybe you're emotional, you're crying, and they start getting really irritated and really annoyed, and they don't typically do this, and they kind of raise their voice at you. Right? And of course, they obviously regret it. They're like, oh my God, I shouldn't have said that. And maybe they even say, I feel so bad for yelling at you. I feel so bad, for hurting you. They might say that. And you can probably tell they're feeling very guilty. They might even say, this is why I don't like showing emotions. They might say something like that. But they take that time to process. But what you see is they didn't say, I'm sorry I yelled. But what happens next? Sometimes with avoidance, especially if they're overall well-meaning folks, because every person is different, they actually work on their anger issues. They start working on their emotional regulation skills. They start being more patient with you. They start working on patience. A lot of avoidants struggle with patience. Oh my gosh, right? A lot of them are so impatient. A lot of y'all know that. And they are wanting to actually change that because they feel like sorry is just an excuse. And so they have that interesting relationship with sorry. That's why I was mentioning the point right before this. Sometimes when you say sorry, they don't even know how to take it. They're like, just don't do it again, or let's just move on. That's what they believe is the right path. And so I'm not saying this as an excuse, but I'm genuinely saying that avoidants don't think the word sorry is important as the action. A lot of them feel this way. And so if your partner has changed, but they never said sorry, that's just their way of saying sorry, if that makes sense, okay? The next one is very similar, but I'll explain it in more detail. Avoidant individuals tend to have a different conflict resolution style, and so they may actually perceive conflict as just a moment where you guys are problem solving together. And so they don't see it as like an emotional repair mindset. And so they may not see apologies as necessary unless there's a tangible issue that needs fixing. So let's say you're just really upset that they said something in a certain tone. They don't see that as tangible, so they don't see that as something that needs to be corrected or needs an apology for, where you might think, I would like you to apologize because you said that very bluntly, and you think there's an emotion like a bond that needs to be repaired, but they don't see it like that. Now, if they bumped into you by accident and like you fell over, they're gonna say, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry, right? Because that is tangible, right? Another example, which is so interesting, I have one patient where a couple, and I see this a lot, right? Where it's like a couple might fight and this guy or girl, but let's just say guy, dismiss avoidant, he just never says sorry with those emotional things, but he's totally fine if, I don't know, he missed the red light or whatever it is, or they were going to a date and he went to the wrong location and he says, oh, I'm sorry, right? And she's like, okay, that's annoying. We're going to be stuck in traffic trying to get to our reservation, whatever it is. So he can say, I'm sorry for these tangible issues. I'm sorry that we went late to the date because I drove down the wrong street, whatever. He can say, I'm sorry that I dropped the milk, whatever it is, and now there's milk everywhere, whatever it is. But they can't, it's hard for them to tangibly recognize, I'm sorry for saying it in that tone, if that makes sense. And so understanding that can help recognize, mentioning to them, I would like an apology because I think there should be an emotional repair. I feel like there's something that happened, even if it wasn't tangible, it's something that still bothers me, and I'd like us to look at that. So kind of word it in a way that's problem solving while still putting the emotion in there, okay? The next one is just genuinely, they don't realize the impact. They just may simply not realize the extent of the harm it caused, especially if it's emotional or relational context, right? And without awareness, a need for apology might not even register, which is why I recommend, if this is the case, you could ask them, if this is something that really hurt me, are you sorry that I feel sad, right? And maybe say, okay, that's good to hear. Do you mind if you just say that you're sorry? Whatever you want, whatever your direction is, or if you recognize they don't recognize it, have a more conversation to recognize why they don't see the impact, okay? And the last one is they feel guilty, and if they admit they're wrong, that they did something, they're afraid that you're going to leave. I'm just telling you the truth. Sometimes they feel like admitting that I'm sorry, you might be like, this is their fear, which I know you're not going to do, but they feel like, oh, so you did do it. You are wrong. You are incompetent. Then I guess I should leave you. That's like their fear. And of course, it's not rational, but that's actually why some of them don't admit that they're wrong, right? I hope this makes sense to somebody. Please like, subscribe, and I'll see you in the next one.